Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first Global Forum on Climate Change Law and Institutions. I am the MC, Professor Kim Sang-Hoon of Korea University. Taking this opportunity for the first Global Forum, we are going to talk about the Green New Deal, the carbon neutrality, as well as the just transitions. First of all, let's welcome the opening ceremony. And opening remarks will be done by the President of the Korea Legislation Research Institute, Kyunghee. Distinguished guests, nice to meet you all. I am the president of the KLRI, Kyunghee. I'd like to extend my gratitude to all participants from on and offline, as well as all the experts and academia from home and abroad. My especially thanks also go to all the people by welcoming you. The KLRI, as well as the CSD lab, since the end of the last year, we have also preparing a lot of the active discussions in the fields of the law and institutions to deal with the climate change, along with the master plans. And this year, we're going to have the fourth series of the Global Forum on Climate Change, Law and Institutions. And this is the first Global Forum for this year. Through these discussions and the forums, opportunities and the challenges in dealing with the climate change, we're really looking forward to the taking forward-looking visions in deal with the carbon neutrality. Nowadays, we have seen a lot of transformation stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, a lot of expected pandemic as well as the natural disasters have been also stemming from the climate crisis as well. That's why the global society have been combating actively in dealing with the climate change. In particular, the Korean government has proposed the active specific measures in dealing with the carbon neutrality along with the executions as well. For implementing carbon neutrality, and now the Korean government will be also suggesting groundbreaking and innovative the challenges as well as the opportunities in the society and economy. In terms of the carbon neutrality and the green economy, will be also transform the transitions from the energy. Therefore, will be absolutely would have some challenges to really provide the equitable the opportunities to everybody in the societies, in the regions and the industries as well. In this regard, for the communities and the regions and societies, and throughout the processes of the carbon neutral society, everyone, every industry should also be involved and embraced. Therefore, the green economy and the carbon neutrality should be also basically and stemming from the just transitions for the industries, regions, as well as the social members. To do so, we have a lot of the tasks and objectives to really implement those measures. Throughout today's forum, we'll be also joined by a lot of the experts in the different regions and different backgrounds. Therefore, we'll be also sharing a lot of the very active experiences and the communications. I'm really looking forward to taking the various opinions and the comments as well. Therefore, I really look forward to taking continued exchanges and cooperations in the law and institutions in dealing with the climate change. In conclusion, I really especially thank all of your dedications and SIG members, including Professor Chung Suh-Yong, for hosting this event. I'm really looking forward to taking a lot of tangible outcomes and the ideas. Once again, let me also extend my gratitude to everyone for your participation. Thank you very much for your good opening remarks, President. Now we'll be also joined by the Senior Advisor of the CSD Lab, as well as the former Vice Minister of the Environment of Korea. Good afternoon, everyone. My especially thanks also go to the President of the KLRI, Kyunghee, as well as the Senior the president of the Korean Society of the Climate Change Research, No Dong-won, and Michael, the ambassador of the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany, as well as the acting director of the UNDP Seoul Policy Center. On behalf of the co-host of CSD Lab, I'm very delighted to have these opportunities to provide the welcoming remarks. Now, as the Korean government announced a Green New Deal policy since the July last year, as well as the 2050 carbon neutrality policies, the Korean government is also putting a lot of the efforts for implementing those policies. There was the climate summit hosted by the US in April this year, as well as the P4G climate summit hosted by the Korean government. We also see in the recent G7 summit, and there will be also 26, the COP will be hosted in November this year. Despite the pandemic, the international community is continuing their efforts in dealing with the climate change. The carbon neutrality in dealing with the climate change definitely require a lot of the challenges and the transformations from the outdated paradigm, which is the fossil fuel-oriented paradigm, into the renewable energy and the new energy systems. As we have seen a lot of the declarations of the transitions into the new and the renewable energies, the Korean government also declared the decarbonizations, as well as the strong efforts in shutting down the coal-fired power plants. Not only that, the decarbonized structure transitions should be also pivotal roles that we have to should put our efforts again. Therefore, these are the challenges which are inevitable. Of course, ultimately, in order to implement the carbon neutrality, these challenges and objectives should be also the fundamental and essential. For the last century, in terms of this development for the economy as well as the society, industries, workers, and the locations of all the related the businesses should be also involved in embrace as well in order to fully process and complement those changes and transformation. They should be also be treated equally and equitable manner as well. As the UN declared, the strong efforts and as well as the SDG by the 2030, as acknowledged by the international community, which is the Sustainable Development Goal, and this is also have a strong efforts to implement the theme, which is no one will left behind. Therefore, that's why we'll be also talking about those related issues, and that's why we have invited experts in order to really build the solutions and the measures for the carbon neutrality. In order to achieve the carbon neutrality, and we should also focus on all the measures and the ways that no one will left behind as part of the seeking our solutions and the policies. In order to host this event and the forum, I would like to say special thank the Center for the Climate and Marine Governance of Korea University and the KLRI of Korea University and the KSCC, the Korean Society of Climate Change Research, and the business newspaper, as well as the Embassy of Germany in Korea, as well as representatives from the CSD Lab. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now we will listen to the congratulatory remarks from three people. First, President Roh Dong-hoon of the Korea Society of Climate Change Research will deliver his congratulatory remarks. Honorable President Kim Ge-hong of KLRI, Senior Advisor Hyun-Jong of CSD Lab, Ambassador Mihaela Penshtul of Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany, three experts who will make a valuable presentation, moderator and panelists, and participants of today's forum. I'm very delighted to participate in the first global forum on climate change. At the 21st Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change held in Paris in 2015, Paris Agreement, which will go down in history, was signed. The implementation of the Paris Agreement started in full swing this year. The fact that it took only 5 years from adoption to implementation and the largest number of leaders gathered since the UN was formed and signed the Paris Agreement shows that the climate change is a very serious issue. The goal of the Paris Agreement is to limit the global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, preferably 1.5 degrees Celsius, compared to the pre-industrial levels. Even when the countries implement their NDC submitted to the UN faithfully, the global greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 would reach 56 billion tons of CO2 equivalent, which is reduction of 3 billion tons of CO2 equivalent, or 5% of the 59 billion tons of CO2 equivalent, which is emission under the current policy. To achieve the 2 degrees Celsius target, many countries declared carbon neutrality. After China and Japan, Korea declared carbon neutrality last year. Energy emissions, CO2 emissions will be 22 billion CO2 tons, and global temperature would increase by 21 Celsius degree by 2050. And it is necessary to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 100% by 2050, but only 35% reduction of 34 billion CO2 tons is expected. To achieve the carbon neutrality by 2050, the power sector needs to achieve zero emission by 2040, and the building sector and the transportation sector need to achieve zero emissions. And the renewable energy need to be responsible for more than 2/3 of the energy supply. And coal, oil, and gas supply need to be reduced significantly, and photovoltaic energy and wind power need to be increased significantly. Through the technologies like photovoltaic energy and wind power generation, we can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 80%. But half of the greenhouse gas emissions we are supposed to reduce after 2030 need to be handled by the new technologies like hydrogen and bioenergy. It is expected that 14 million new jobs will be created thanks to the investment in this sector, but a lot of jobs will be lost at the same time. 930 gigawatt coal-fired thermal power plants need to be closed after 2030 in China alone, and large number of coal power plants are expected to shut down in India. 30% of oil reserves, 50% of gas reserves, and 80% of coal reserves should be closed. It means that $10 to $20 trillion of stranded assets will be made between 2015 and 2050. While new jobs in investment opportunities are being created, many people will lose their jobs and will not recover their investment. Therefore, the process of achieving carbon neutrality should be transparent, and policy considerations are necessary to encompass people from all walks of life. I think that holding this forum under the theme of Green New Deal and fair transition is just very meaningful and timely, as the Korean government is preparing for the carbon neutrality strategies, and I hope that fruitful discussions and measures are discussed through this forum. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now we'll listen to another council remarks from Mikhail Leifenschütter, Ambassador of Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany.
Of the co-hosting organizations, English speakers and listeners, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to participate in today's international seminar on Green, New Deal and Just Transition. On behalf of the German Embassy, let me express our appreciation to the Korea Legislation Research Institute, the Center for Global Climate and Marine Governance of Korea University, the Center for Climate and Sustainable Development Law and Policy, as well as the Korean Society of Climate Change Research, and last but not least, you personally, Professor Chung, as in the seminar. We are also very grateful for the opportunity to support the event together with Energy Business newspaper. Initiatives and seminars like today, they are highly important. They allow us to learn from each other. And events like today, they are an excellent platform to share and to discuss further ideas on green recovery, green mobility, green technology, and green transition. Korea and Germany are joining hands to overcome the COVID-19 economic effects, as well as tackle challenges associated with pressing environmental issues, such as climate change. This gives us also a chance to rebuild better, greener, and fairer. Germany, like Korea, recognizes this opportunity and is determined to make the right decisions for our future. Investments in renewable energy, biodiversity, and just transition. For example, following the coal phase out, they will ultimately allow us to transform into a more sustainable society. This is in fact a key to reaching our ambitions and climate goal for 2030 and greenhouse gas neutrality by 2045. But we still have to go a long way. How do we inspire the public for green transportation? How do we engage to other sectors of the economy? How can we encourage research into green energy alternatives? And how do we make this process as inclusive and fair as possible? Get everybody on board. The answers to these questions will ultimately determine the success of our economic transformation. But we cannot do it alone. In this team effort, we see Korea as a like-minded and important partner. Korea and Germany, we share many similarities. We are both highly industrialized, export-oriented nations with a focus on manufacturing, and we both have an interest in a sustainable and affordable energy supply. A major platform for cooperation is our energy partnership. Korea and Germany have expertise and spirit of innovation. For example, in the field of hydrogen, in renewables, we complement each other. Together, we can revolutionize our energy sector, achieve greenhouse gas neutrality, and overcome the climate crisis. We have some outstanding expert speakers here today. Their presentations will give us some valuable insights into how we can move green recovery and just transition forwards. Many thanks.
네, 개회식의 마지막 순서.
As part of the last session for the introduction section, and Jupuner, Acting Director of UNDP Seoul Policy Center, will deliver the congratulatory remarks.
Paul, a big thanks to Professor Chung for accommodating me at the last minute in this important lineup of today's hybrid forum on the Green New Deal and just transition. I have recently joined the Seoul Policy Center of the United Nations Development Program as its interim director. And as such, it's a great pleasure to say hello to you all, and I look forward to working with you. Indeed, I'm delighted to give congratulatory remarks at today's session covering such a timely topic. Professor Chung is an excellent partner of the UNDP Seoul Policy Center, and our cooperation goes back over several years and includes our solid collaboration in the KLRCI-supported 3-year-long climate forestry project in Ethiopia, our joint cooperation in successive climate COP side events at the Korea Pavilion, and various other fora and publications through the years. Allow me to highlight 2 points relevant to the discussion today. First, we live in a moment when a planetary emergency and the COVID-19 pandemic together have depleted the world's natural and human capital, pushing up to 1 billion more people into extreme poverty by 2030 and devastating the lives and livelihoods of countless more. This moment calls for a dramatic shift in how we approach development cooperation and for greater effort and ambition to reverse these setbacks and resume our journey to Agenda 2030. Therefore, the topic of a just transition in the green recovery and Green New Deal context is vital in the search for pathways towards building forward better together. UNDP's aspiration here is to help countries expand people's choices for a fairer, sustainable future to build the world envisaged by Agenda 2030 with planet and people in balance and harmony. My colleague Sarwat will further elaborate on some of these issues in her upcoming presentation later on. Let me end by congratulating the organizers for this very timely forum, and I wish all of us a very interesting and productive session. I remain committed to continuing the robust partnership between our center and the Korea University. Thank you very much for your attention. 감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다. 네, 이것으로
Thank you very much. This is end of the opening session, and we will now move on to the presentation session. I'd like to thank all the speakers. Senior Advisor of CSD Lab, President of the KLRI, Ambassador of the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Korea, and Acting Director of the UNDP Seoul Policy Center. Thank you all for your great remarks. Today, we are holding this seminar under the theme of Green New Deal and Just Transition, and we will have 3 presenters followed by discussion session. Suh-Yong, Professor of Korea University, will serve as a moderator.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Professor Suh-Yong of the Division of the International Studies of Korea University. Taking this opportunity, I'd like to especially thank all the participants for honoring this event. Regarding the just transition as the main topic, and probably a lot of the people have called it just transitions as well as just food transitions as well. And in terms of the carbon neutrality as well as the Green New Deal, it probably a new spotlight have been also attracting a lot of the people's attention. In this regard, we are going to talk about related issues. And in addition, as we have also believed on behalf of the host, the Carbon New Deal, which is a part of the carbon neutrality and the just transition, will be very meaningful and timely to discuss here. And I believe that the importance of the just transition should be also essential. In this regard, as already mentioned by all the speakers for opening sessions, we have been also recognized the importance as well as important measures to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as all the new circumstances that faced by the developing countries. In this regard, a lot of the problems should require a clear commitment as well as the efforts along with the international community. Especially the Green New Deal have been pursued mainly by the European countries as well. In this regard, we really hope that today's program will be presented by the 3 speakers. And they will be also joined by the domestic experts for the discussions. We'll be also inviting the 3 overseas speakers for the presentations as they have a lot of the long experience for their institutions. And the first speaker will be the Chowdhury, the policy specialist of the UNDP Seoul Policy Center. And personally, I am very delighted, but at the same time, I feel very sorry because the Chowdhury will be working for the UNDP Seoul Policy Center in Korea. And today is the last day for her work in Korea. So I feel very sorry to really see the policy specialist. And the Professor Felix Matthes is working for the Oko-Institute for Applied Ecology. As you're well aware, in European regions, especially the Germany is the one of the countries, along with the putting their efforts as international community is the focusing on the strong measures to deal with the decarbonization and therefore relate to industries and the measures in the related the areas as well as the job employment will be the key pillars for discovering the new opportunities along with the era of the decarbonization. Therefore, the Germany has also put a lot of efforts, and probably Germany will be also one of the very good examples that we have to look into. Next speaker will be the Chris Hopkins, Policy Manager of Green Economy Coalition of the UK, GEC, as a civic group. He has been also done a lot of the civic activities. From his presentations, we'll be also looking into how the coalition has done for the communities in respect to the carbon neutrality. Then, by wrapping those backgrounds of the three speakers due to the time constraints as well, will we invite the first speaker, if you don't mind, so Sarwat. Professor Sarwat Chowdhury, I am the professor of the Korean University, and please proceed your presentations.
To yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chung, for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening to you, those of you who are joining from overseas. It's a real pleasure for me to join today's hybrid session. And as Professor Chung kindly mentioned, I work as a policy specialist and a manager for the Resilience Program for UNDP based in Seoul. And indeed, today is my last day in my current position at this office. So it's again a great pleasure because Professor Chung and the Korea University is a very good partner, as our director just mentioned. And I'm glad to be able to speak on our work on the Green New Deal and just transition issues. So now, if I may request the second slide, please. So I wanted to give a little bit of a background on climate change realities that we face. So global fossil fuel related CO2 emissions rose between 62% between 1990 and 2019. It rose by 62%. And statistics show that by 2050, the number of people at risk of floods will increase from current level of 1.2 billion to 1.6 billion. Currently, I'm speaking to you from the west coast of the US in California. And we have been going through a massive heat wave here. And you may have seen in the news as well, the Pacific Northwest, Canada, has been experiencing record-breaking triple-digit temperatures and started about actually from June 26th. So it's been a few days. And, you know, it's kind of a combination of high pressure, jet stream that has kind of been sending hot air. And see, this kind of a combination of high pressure system, record temperature, can be attributed to human-induced climate change. So overall, even though countries are experiencing lockdown for COVID-19, the CO2 concentration this has not increased. So we are not really seeing a reduction in anything. And under this limiting warming to 1.5 degrees that we all aim for is not impossible, but it does require unprecedented conditions in all aspects of society. So the next 10 years that we are calling the decade of action until 2030 are critical in this matter. Global net human-caused emissions of CO2 needs to fall by 45% from 2010 levels by 2030. And we need to reach net zero by 2050, as the previous have already said. That also means remaining emissions would need to be balanced by removing carbon dioxide from the air. I wanted to show these two figures on the left of this slide. So this is the People's Climate Vote. That is the largest survey of public opinion on climate change that has ever been conducted. This was done in late 2020 as part of UNDP's Mission 1.5 campaign. And the UNDP worked with the University of Oxford, as well as a number of NGOs to educate people about climate change, and also ask them about their opinion on climate actions. So the vote found that 2/3, about 64% of the people that were surveyed in 50 countries around the world, of these people, climate change is a global emergency. So, and on the top figure, as you can see, the belief in climate emergency was very strong in the SEED countries, small island developing states, 74%, followed by high-income countries, middle-income countries, and also LDCs. And the figure in the bottom shows that among the people who said that climate change is global emergency, 59% said that the world should do everything necessary and urgently in response. But then you see a different kind of level of response. What I wanted to highlight that 41% of the respondees said that they didn't demand urgent and comprehensive action. That means more education is still needed, even for those people who are concerned about climate change, that the need for action is urgent. So I just wanted to highlight that, and let's move on to the next slide. So this is the next slide, please. The slide says international trends. Yes, thank you. So the robust green recovery trends are very important. We are talking about building back better, building forward better. So these kind of green recovery plans must be meaningfully integrated into multi-year, multi-dimensional economic growth plans. However, currently environmentally perverse subsidies seem to be the predominant trend still. So this chart shows that the amount of money G20 countries have committed towards either green or brown recovery since the beginning of COVID in early 2020. So as of June 16, 2021, brown recovery trumps green recovery, both in total amount as well as per capita. And this is actually unfortunate because, as we know, COVID-19 provides a rare opportunity to build back better, build back smarter and greener. So let's go to the next slide. So this is about the convergence of crisis. We are currently facing this convergence of different crises that are exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And that shows the need for integrated solutions with a long-term perspective. So these crises, and on the left side, as you can see, include continued environmental degradation and destruction of biodiversity. And the international community have not achieved any of the 20 IT biodiversity targets that were agreed in Japan in 2010. And of course, we are facing the rapidly warming planet with extremes of all the weather events. And in 2019 and also 2020, were the highest temperature on record. Then we also have the COVID-19 pandemic and its health and socioeconomic consequences, which has disproportionately impacted the most vulnerable, potentially forcing 1 billion people into extreme poverty by 2030 and leaving many nations in severe debt distress, which actually calls for unfortunate trade-off between investing in people's immediate needs and a longer-term green recovery. We are also looking into the rapid technological changes, which unlocks opportunities in the long run, but also presents socioeconomic challenges. For example, the digital divide among those with internet access and those without threatens to grow inequalities, as we saw during the pandemic and still experiencing. Those with reliable internet access can continue their education online, and those without cannot. So the global response to the pandemic over the past year has unlocked trillions of dollars in fiscal support and has seen a substantial increase in social protection measures that proves that we can work together in an unprecedented way to solve the challenge that faces us. And we do have a generational opportunity to build a new path forward using the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement as compass to achieve an inclusive, resilient, and decarbonized future. So we need to invest in physical and digital structure for both the immediate and problems, and also providing jobs and resilience to meet the future trends, and also breach the funding gap that currently emphasizes the short-term humanitarian crisis, and especially in the health sector, with mid to longer-term socioeconomic investments that address the root causes of climate change, biodiversity loss, and inequality. Second, we must revise the economic incentive structure to catalyze nature climate positive investment. So that means sending right market signals by ending fossil fuel subsidies and disincentivizing polluting behavior through an adequate carbon price that synergizes with the targets of Paris Agreement. And also third, we need to deepen the existing partnerships and accelerate new ones with new actors to catalyze innovative financing. So that may include debt for nature and debt for climate swaps, as well as green and blue bonds. And well-designed nature solutions can deliver multiple benefits, supporting climate mitigation, adaptation, and also protect biodiversity and the vulnerable ecosystems, which actually provides humanity, a lot of humanity depends on to survive and to prosper. So let's go on to the next slide, please. Yes. So, in terms of the just transition and transition, and in 2015, the International Labour Organization published its guidelines for a just transition towards an environmentally sustainable economic and economies and societies for all. And at the 2018 UNFCCC Climate Summit in Poland, the heads of state and governments adopted the Solidarity and Just Transition Declaration that highlighted the importance of just transition, as mentioned in the Paris Agreement as well later on. And a transition, just transition ensures environmental sustainability, as well as decent work, social inclusion, and poverty eradication. However, a greener economy is not necessarily inclusive and socially sustainable by default. Social and market policies will need to complement economic and environmental policies to kind of buffer the downside of transitions to a green economy. And there are a number of factors that need to be considered when planning transitions, and I'll go through them in the next few slides, but you can see them in the bullet points here. So let's go to the next slide, please. The next slide on clean energy transition. Yes, thank you very much. So clean energy is a smart investment. And as we know, the price of solar power has fallen by 90% in 10 years. Countries need to cooperate to phase out fossil fuels through impactful and fair energy price systems and reforms. And at UNDP, we are support government and fossil fuel subsidies and introduce carbon pricing in a way that benefits all communities. However, governments can't do this alone. Commercial capital is very important to invest at the stage and needed. And through our policy approach, UNDP support countries put in place policies and regulations that enable large-scale clean energy investment that are traditionally seen as higher risk. And we are working with different partners, including UNEP, IRENA, Sustainable Energy for All, the Green Climate Fund, and others to capitalize scaled-up climate investments that contribute to the energy transition that are most impactful. Let's go to the next slide, please. So climate resilient economies and sustainable practices. So global economic restructuring that creates synergies between climate action and economic growth are very important, and in terms of supporting solutions that support climate adaptation and mitigation, as well as protecting biodiversity and valuable ecosystem services. And in sectors, sustainable practices in sectors such as agriculture, infrastructure, energy, and others, ocean economy, waste management. And you can see a couple of the documents under the PAGE initiative that UNDP is part of, and Korea is a donor to the UN PAGE initiative. So one of the top publication actually our center contributed, and I worked on a for health case study in Zimbabwe, where we are looking into climate resilience, building, utilizing solar power. So so I just wanted to highlight this publication. Let's move on to the next slide. This is talking about green jobs, education, skills, and retraining. And part of ensuring a just transition also means acknowledging and planning for the job losses in conflicted areas. So the potential short-term adverse impact can and must be anticipated and effectively managed to realize the long-term gains in just transition. So ILO estimates that by 2030, the energy transition could lead to the loss of 6 million jobs, but it would also create 24 million jobs. So this is just a direct benefit in terms of jobs. The effective value of transition is much more than that. And the green jobs, the definition, as we can explain, is decent jobs that in any economic sector, so agriculture, industry, services, administration, which contributes to preserving and restoring and enhancing environmental quality. And so this, in the slide, you can also see the ILO's green job and different aspects for the green jobs program is looking at for the creation of more and better green jobs. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So this is about gender equality and gender COVID-19 impact on women. Women have played a major role as frontline women. 70% of the health care workers are risking their lives are women, and infection rates among health workers are up to 3 times higher than among the male counterparts. However, women on average make up only 24% of members among the 225 COVID-19 task forces that were examined in 137 countries. And this is the result of the COVID-19 Global Gender Response Tracker tool that looked into government pandemic policies. So in this 26, and only in 26 task forces, there were actually no women at all. So the global trend of kind of women's representation has been shockingly missing in the COVID-19 context as well. And still less than 1 in 5 of labor market and social protection measures to tackle the COVID-19 crisis are gender sensitive. As we know, also women represent very, like most 1/3 of the global sustainable energy workforce, and in the STEM professions, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, also their share is typically low. But with the transition towards a low carbon climate resilient future, can and should be achieved through processes that leverage gender and social inclusion to maximize outcomes for both women and the environment. So let's go to the next slide. So this is about poverty eradication and equitable solution. I won't repeat all of it, but COVID-19 has pushed between 119 to 124 million people in extreme poverty during 2020, which calls for integrated solutions for climate resilience, inclusive economies, and payments for ecosystem service schemes can help maintain health ecosystems and provide additional revenues for individuals, communities. For example, as seen is in Costa Rica, and also reforestation can be a driver for rural development. And of course, the South Korean case is very famous in this case. Let's go to the next slide on just transition and Green New Deal linkages. So the speakers have mentioned before that European Green New Deal investment plan plans to mobilize at least €1 trillion of investments over the next decade, and providing incentives to unlock and redirect public and private investments, supporting public authorities and projects to promote in planning, designing, and executing sustainable projects. In Korea, we know about the Korea New Deal planning to invest about 144 billion in creating 1.9 million jobs by 2025. And the Korean New Deal focuses on the digital deal, Green New Deal, as well as some kind of the overarching policy support to strengthen employment and social safety net. On the right side, you can see one of our UNDP blogs that we, from the Seoul Policy Center, our role is to kind of facilitate exchange of knowledge, and Korean New Deal is something that we are looking into and sharing. So this is a blog I had written earlier for UNDP. And then let's go to the next slide, please. So this is talking about UNDP's comparative advantage in so since 2008, we've been working and supporting 75 countries in integrating adaptation into national development planning, investment processes, and supporting the nationally determined contribution processes are since the Paris Agreement. And you can see some of the numbers, so I won't go into detail on this one. We, among the UN agency, UNDP has the largest program on climate change, and we work in 145 plus countries on this on climate change mitigation and adaptation issues. Let's go to the next slide, please. In terms of UNDP's support to governments in pursuing green recovery, we are focusing on three areas: driving a low carbon energy transition, leveraging nature-based solution, and the third one is combating inequalities. So lowering poverty and inequality, integrated nature climate solutions, green job creation, digital inclusion, clean energy access, and strengthening social protection measures and governance for working in countries like Rwanda and Egypt. So next one, let's go to the next slide. This, yes, so this is about UNDP's climate promise, which is a commitment from the organization to ensure that any country that wishes to review and revise national pledges under the Paris Agreement is able to do so. And we, despite the COVID-19 pandemic last year, we continued to support, and actually most vulnerable countries have been actually raising their climate ambition, and this work is continuing this year as well, backed by an in-depth analysis of the hurdles that countries face to enhance and implement NDCs, and we are working at different levels. We're building political will, reviewing and aligning, updating existing policies, incorporating new sectors, as well as assessing cost and investment opportunities, and also working on the monitoring part of it, and review strengthening transparency part of it. Let's go to the next slide. So this is our climate promise work, which is again helping 110 plus countries raising their climate ambitions. So you can see some of the figures here in terms of we have been leverage financing about 34 million from particularly local and bilateral donors, and we have 13 areas of thematic focus and we work on with a number of partners, including NDC partnership, IRENA, UNEP, UNICEF, UN Women, UN Habitat, the World Bank Group, and others, and of course our donor partners, including SIDA and others. So let's go to the next one, which is about UNDP's nationally determined contribution, support NDCs to recovery. So a new study by the Oxford University shows that the recovery packages that seek synergy between economic and climate growth have better potential for reducing climate risk, increasing and productive human, social, physical, and natural capital. So NDCs and green recovery can be mutually reinforcing, and recovery plans can incorporate NDC targets and strategies while also leveraging NDC enhancement processes, including stakeholder consultations, socio-economic and sectoral assessment, modeling, to strengthen systems that pave the way for long-term development. And in terms of our offer to provide the support, as I mentioned before, we are aligning NDC and green recovery policies, leveraging and integrating climate planning and financing framework, strengthening engagement with finance ministries, as well as enhancing gender responsive and inclusive processes, building national capacity and facilitating South-South collaboration. And let's move to the next slide now, which is my last slide. So, I see that there's actually the one slide before. So I actually went over the building back better and the Korean New Deal. So I think I won't go over that again, but we know that the Korea announced its ambitions by 2050 last December, the 3 parts of the Korean New Deal. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so so this is my thank you slide, but I just wanted to refer back to the convergence of crisis that I mentioned earlier. So we now have a generational opportunity to build a new path forward. And the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, these are our compasses that can help us to build this inclusive society and have a just transition. So again, I would highlight the 3 points I mentioned. We must invest in the physical and digital infrastructure that deliver both the immediate and lasting health protection, jobs, and resilience to future threats. We must provide economic incentive structure so that we can catalyze nature climate positive investments, sending right signals for fossil fuel subsidy and to fossil fuel subsidy, and kind of disincentivize the polluting behavior that we see now. And the third point, again, I want to highlight is to deepen existing partnerships and accelerating new ones with new actors so that we can catalyze innovative financing, including debt for nature swap, green blue bonds, and these kind of well-designed solutions can deliver multiple benefits and support climate change protection, adaptation, mitigation, protect biodiversity and valuable ecosystem services, and on which our humanity depends to survive and prosper. So with that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is very hard to join online because she is in US now. And for the first presentation, I'd like to summarize like this. The reason why we are here today is to think about what we can do to respond to climate change and clean energy need to be used, or we need to raise the awareness of the new generations. And to be specific, we need to change the buildings into more eco-friendly one. And in this process, what should we do and to ensure no one left behind? We need to make good opportunities, and we need to think about those who may be left behind by supporting them, by providing them with an incentives. And this cannot be done at the domestic level. International society should join our hands together. And UNDP is an organization supporting developing countries, and she well summarized what activities are done by the UNDP. We invited very prominent speakers because at this moment, there are many people who are making an effort, and there might be an issue regarding the coal power plant. So we invite a speaker who will talk about the just transition and restructuring of the coal industry. And there were many discussions about the coal phase out while making sure that no one is left behind. And Germany made a lot of effort to be on the right track. And we invited the Felix Matthes, who is a research coordinator from Oko-Institut. So let's listen to his presentation.
All the Korean listeners, I'm very proud to have been invited to the presentation and to provide some insights on the coal phase out in Germany, where we went through an interesting, challenging process to bring the German coal mining and the German coal power generation in line with the climate target, and to do this in a way that we can meet the requirements of a just transition. I'm Felix Matthes. I'm with the Oko-Institut, which is a private research organization founded in Germany in 1977. We employ a lot of researchers who work in all dimensions of climate and energy policy, etc., etc. I've been a member of the German Coal Commission, which designed the ultimate coal phase out, and so I was part of the process, which I would like to provide some insights. The first and important point to mention is that coal phase out in Germany has a longer history. What you can see on this slide is, number one, Germany. As you know, Germany was united in 1990. The green area is the former communist part of the country. The blue area is the old Federal Republic of Germany. And you can see here that coal mining has been an issue and has been in business in both parts of the country. And you can see with the black circles that we have mined a lot of hard coal in the past. And the hard coal mining has been subject to phase out over decades and was finalized in 2018. And we have a second pillar of the coal business, the coal industry in Germany, which is the lignite. You can see this here with the brown circles, which is partly operated until today, and which was one of the key issues of the coal phase out in Germany. I think this is important to consider that there is a longer history, because the most recent decisions and the recent pathways for coal phase out and the program which was set up to ensure the just transition process makes at some points some reference to the existing experiences from the coal phase out. And these experiences are extremely different if it comes to hard coal and lignite. What you can see here is the hard coal production in Germany, as well as the employment in the hard coal industry. And you can see that the hard coal industry has been subject to a relatively steady decline since the 1960s. And this decline was painful, but during the course of this decline, which was politically driven essentially by the economics of the hard coal mining in Western Germany, but many mechanisms to compensate or to cushion the hardships of these transitions have been developed in this longer and steady phase-out process for the hard coal. This is totally different for the lignite. You can see here that we have three major lignite mining areas in Germany, and the dark brown area is the lignite mining in the western part, and the two light brown areas show the lignite production and also the employment in the eastern part. And you can see here that immediately after the German unification, the lignite industry in the eastern part of the country has crashed. And so we see here the opposite of a steady phase-out process. This was a crash which has been a reference for all the processes for the next stages of lignite phase-out, because especially in the eastern, that means the formerly Communist Party part of the country, you can see that there has been an experience from a structural change, which was essentially characterized by a crash where a structural adjustment took place in a period of a very few years. And this is important to bear in mind, that there are two different, let's say, social experiences and political experiences from coal phase out, the steady decline in the western part, and the crash essentially in the lignite regions of the eastern part. However, the ultimate driver for the most recent coal phase-out decision has been climate policy. You can see here the trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions for Germany between 1990 and 2020. You can see here we have seen significant emission reduction, partly caused by the structural adjustment of the eastern part of the country, but you can also see that there are two different trajectories. The first is the black bar indicate the emission levels from power generation. And power generation in Germany, the emissions from power generation come essentially from coal. You can see here that there has been some emission decrease from the power sector, but it is still the biggest single sector in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So the coal-fired power generation produces more greenhouse gas emissions than all buildings and all the transport in Germany. However, we have seen some emission decrease. You can see this in the black line, not in a very steady process. And we have other sectors. The blue lines show you that the transportation sector ran totally out of control in terms of emission reduction. That means that there was a need to have a strong focus on the power sector and the power generation from coal due to the high level of emissions. And these are the next phases of the energy transition towards climate neutrality. The most important upcoming challenges come from the transportation. But in 2015, the political system realized that there is no way to do nothing in terms of emission reduction in the coal-based power generation. You can see this is in the black line that the emissions from power production have been almost constant between 1995 and 2015. And afterwards, it has started to decrease. And that leads me to some history of the coal phase out, which you should bear in mind if you want to understand how it worked. The phase out of hard coal mining has been a longer process, and in the end of 2018, the last hard coal mine in Germany closed. This is not to say that also the electricity generation from hard coal was terminated. We have still a significant share of hard coal-based electricity generation now based on imported hard coal, but the link between mining and the power was broken in the end of 2018 when the last hard coal mine closed. In 2015, and I said this before, the first ruling politicians realized that there is a need for an active phase-out policy. And so in 2015, the first steps were taken to buy out some lignite power plants out of the market. However, that was not sufficient. It was only the start. And the major breakthrough came in 2018 and 19 when the German federal government set up a commission, which was called the Commission on Growth, Structural Change and Employment. So it's better known as the Coal Commission. And this Coal Commission had the task to design the phase-out trajectory and the phase-out mechanisms, but also to design a program to ensure a softer adjustment for jobs and especially for the regions. After the Coal Commission issued their recommendations in January 2019, we had a two years implementation process with regard to the coal phase-out, but also with regard to the employment program and the support programs for the affected regions. However, in 2019, we saw another major change in the political environment because the new European Commission issued the target in cooperation with the member state that there should be a much sharper decrease of carbon and greenhouse gas emissions to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. And this is somehow related to a more ambitious emission reduction target for 2030, which is now 55%. As a result of this, a massive increase of the carbon prices in the European Union emissions trading occurred. We are actually at a level of 50 euro per ton of CO2, which probably will accelerate the coal phase-out trajectory significantly. And another acceleration results from the new German climate neutrality goal, where it is now settled by law that climate neutrality should be achieved by the year 2045. This is interestingly a result of a ruling by the German Constitutional Court, which said if emission reductions are postponed too long, then this will limit the freedom of the future generation, and that is not acceptable under the German constitution. So the coal phase-out has been a longer process, and the dynamics of this process have increased over time significantly, and also have increased significantly after the Coal Commission issued their recommendations and the specific coal phase-out legislation was approved. This is a more detailed view to the German Coal Commission. It was an interesting composition. 1/3 of the members were pro-coal, 1/3 of the members coal critics, 1/3 neutral, and the majority of 2/3 was needed to issue recommendations. You can see here that the composition was comparatively broad from industry, trade unions, from environmental NGOs. We had a significant segment of scientists. I was one of these scientists from the energy and climate segment, but we had also representatives from non-energy companies, and we had local representatives partly pro-coal, partly coal critics in the Commission. So, and we worked for more than 7 months very hard to understand ourselves, to find compromises with regard to the phase-out trajectory, but also with regard to the employment dimension and the support of the regions which are affected by the coal phase-out. This is the age structure of the German coal fleet as it has been in 2019. You can see here very different ages and very different in terms of hard coal and lignite. And there was a part in the west, a part in the east of the older plants. And there was a part in the west, especially with regard to the hard coal plants. And then we had another chunk of coal-fired power plants in the east. And then we had essentially the last investment wave in coal-fired power plants, unfortunately, after the year 2010, which was essentially in the west. And so the Coal Commission had to solve a puzzle in terms of distributional effects. Lignite versus hard coal, where the lignite is linked to the mines, the hard coal is linked to hard coal import,